The Fringe Podcast Summer Rewatch, Episode 1.
Hi, this is Michael Cerverus. I am the observer on Fox's Fringe, and I'll be watching you while you're listening to the Fringe Podcast.
Web hosting for the Fringe Podcast is provided by HostGator. Easy WordPress installation, unlimited domains, unlimited disk space, unlimited bandwidth, and a 99.9% uptime guarantee. On sale now for $6.36 a month. Visit thefringepodcast.com/hosting and start serving up your website from the best hosting company in any universe. Welcome back to the Fringe Podcast as we kick off our summer rewatch podcast where we're bringing in members of the Fringe Podcast community, sitting around the figurative water cooler, I guess, and talking about our favorite show, Fringe. And I am so pleased to be joined tonight by three awesome members of our community: Dawn in Baltimore, Jean, a.k.a. Blue Eagle, and Michelle, a.k.a. Lemon Cake? We'll learn more about that, I guess. Let's kick it off with Dawn. Dawn, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're at and all that good stuff.
Don Miller. I live in north of Baltimore near the Pennsylvania line, and I'm a medical device sales consultant, and I cover the East Coast, everything that touches the Chesapeake Bay, and married with a 4-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. Started watching Fringe from the very beginning. Was listening to probably Jay and Jack and Lost after enjoying all 6 seasons of Lost, and nice. Had heard their coverage at Comic-Con, and being a J.J. Abrams fan, I thought Fringe was going to be right up my alley. And so I started watching from day one, and as soon as Fringe was announced, I started looking for podcasts and found you guys right from day one.
Wow, great. Very good. I know you've been calling in and been an active member in our voice feedback line, not just for Fringe, but I think you've called in for every single podcast that we've done here at Golden Spiral Media.
Yeah, I love all this stuff that you guys are doing. It's nice listening to you and Clint is like having a conversation with two old friends, and so chatting about kids and dads and movies and iOS devices, you guys have hit on all of my favorite topics.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, let's get the next person in the call here. Jean, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Jean Voigt. I live in lovely Prattville, Alabama, right outside the bustling metropolis of Montgomery. And I am a pilot in the Air Force, actually. And I started watching Fringe back in the winter of 2009 when I was deployed. I downloaded a bunch of the episodes off of iTunes to kind of help pass the time while I was gone, and really got hooked on it. And then probably about the middle of season 2 was when I started actually listening to the podcast under the recommendation of my brother, who'd been listening to you guys since the first season. So real excited to be part of the first live show water cooler episode, and hopefully be able to participate a little bit more. Very good. I know you've been a really active member of our community for quite a while. I see you a lot of time on the chat rooms, and I just want to say thanks for joining us tonight. And if you could, on your mic, I think your mic's a little bit close to your mouth, so when you're hitting those P's and stuff, we're getting a lot of pop on that. So if you can, just pull that away just a little bit from your mouth. If not, then that's fine. Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Okay. And our third community member tonight is Michelle. Michelle, tell us about yourself.
Yes, I'm Michelle. I'm from Tacoma, Washington. I am a stay-at-home mom / student right now. And I have 2 kids. I have a 2-year-old little girl and a 6-year-old boy. And I just stumbled across this podcast a couple weeks ago. I don't know where I've been. But yeah, I've been watching Fringe from day one. I saw the ads and I knew about it the summer before it came out, and I was very excited to see another show come out that's, has roots to my beloved X-Files. So I've been watching it every season, and just haven't really been active in the community of fans yet. But I am glad I found it.
We're glad you found it too, and we're glad that you just jumped right in. I mean, you said you've only been hanging out for a few weeks now, and that's okay. You know, you're just as a part of our community as anyone who's been here, like Don, who's been here since day one. We're glad to have you, and certainly I'm glad that you just jumped right in and were a part of the call tonight, and look forward to what you have to say, and all the rest of our folks as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to the format of the call is each week we're going to invite members of the Fringe Podcast community to call in via Skype. So if you're interested in doing that, like Don and Jean and Michelle are tonight, send an email over to feedback@thefringepodcast.com, and with the subject line of Summer Rewatch. And then what I will do is I will send you some instructions and some guidelines on how it works and what's expected. And then from there we can kind of get you rolled into the Summer Watch schedule. So if you're interested in doing that, send an email over to feedback@thefringepodcast.com with the subject line Summer Rewatch. So the idea each week is we're going to watch about 4 or 5 hours of Fringe, and then just kind of gather here on a Saturday night and talk about it, kind of like a water cooler discussion. A lot of these episodes, particularly these early on episodes, you know, I haven't watched them in probably 3 or 4 years. I mean, I've some of them I've gone back and watched from time to time, but I haven't really watched them in a while. So it's kind of going back and saying, hey, now that we know all that we know, in lieu of having 4 seasons under our belt, what is it we can spot and identify in these early episodes that might give us clues as to what we could expect in season 5, and just enjoy these episodes all over again. So is this a podcast for the noob who hasn't seen Fringe yet? Not necessarily, because we might spoil some things. We are going to be kind of trying to tie in some of the things we've seen in seasons 1, 2, 3, and into 4, and what we want to see and might expect in season 5. So there is definitely a chance for some spoilers to be out there. So keep that in mind. Although I do think it's a great opportunity for you as Fringe fans to bring in people that are either not a member of the Fringe Podcast community and kind of get them involved, just like Michelle is here. You've discovered it, and people, once they kind of discover it, most people like it and enjoy that conversation that we have each week watching Fringe together as a community. So that's part of what our goal is, to help bring people into the community, but bring people into the Fringe community. So if you have friends out there who haven't ever watched Fringe, then now's the great time to get them in. Help them with the summer rewatch and get them geared up for season 5. So we thought it would be a great thing to do on multiple fronts. So we're going to get started here with our thoughts. Tonight we're talking about season 1, episode 1, pilot, episode 2, The Same Old Story, episode 3, The Ghost Network, and episode 4, The Arrival. So I'm going to play that wonderful food for thought music, and we'll get started.
Root beer float. Butterscotch pudding. Mr. Papaya. Fruit cocktail. Coffee yogurt.
Boy, we got lots of great food in these 4 episodes. I can think of root beer that was wanted in the 4th episode. Ginger ale was in the pilot episode. What else did we get, guys?
Well, butterscotch pudding, which is in your intro. And,
of course, yes.
When I was watching the videos, I was going back because I have the DVDs and watching all the little extra features that they had. And I may have misread her, but the casting director during one of the interviews said that it was the butterscotch pudding line that won John Noble the part.
Oh, really?
Funny.
That's great. I'd love to see that audition for him doing the butterscotch pudding line. So, all right, well, we're going to get it started here with episode 1, which was pilot, written by J.J. Abrams, Alex Kurtzman, and Roberto Orci. Those are his guys. I mean, they wrote Star Trek together. Roberto and Alex were high school friends, and they've done so many projects together. And now, since they've been with JJ, they tend to do a lot of their projects together. So they wrote the pilot, directed by Alex Graves. So I'll let you guys kick it off with some of the thoughts that you had, and I'll kind of jump in with some of my thoughts as well. So who wants to take the lead on this one?
I'll go if you want.
Okay.
So having just come off the success of Lost, it really struck me as almost a poor taste to use an airplane right off the bat.
Okay.
But the drama was there, and it really kicked things off. And the first half of the first episode, he hit on all of the cylinders. He had drama, he had disgust and grossness. He threw in a little romance and sex and a crazy person. I mean, it's like he checked off all the little checks that he was going to get done in the first half of the episode.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. He's got the new show coming up called Revolution. And I don't know if you guys have seen the trailer for it, but it's got like airplanes dropping out of the sky. So it definitely seems to be a JJ thing where he likes to incorporate some sort of airplane disaster in his pilots, I guess.
It's probably a fear of his. He thinks he's going to go down in a plane.
Could be. So what were some of your thoughts, Gene?
Well, one of the things that I noticed is that they seem to bring out a whole bunch of different kinds of subplots or different kind of ways that they could, deepen the mythology of the Fringe. And you can see that, some, as we saw as we went along, panned out more than others. But kind of like Don was saying, they really threw a whole lot into this one episode, and it was a 2-hour pilot, so it almost had more like the feel of being a movie that was leading into the series than just kind of the pilot for a new show.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I just noticed a lot of the little things that I forgot about because I haven't watched it since it originally aired. I don't have the DVDs and I have never seen the special features, but I was just like, oh, there's snow. There's never snow anymore,
Yeah.
Just little things like, oh, they're meeting each other for the first time. And I just remember how they used to be as characters as opposed to how they've grown now.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that struck me the most was I'd forgotten. I mean, you knew that they met at some point and that there's always that awkwardness. That's kind of the way any TV pilot works, right? I mean, you have to set the groundwork. You have to introduce these people to the audience, and a lot of times that happens through them being introduced to one another, and that's the way it was here. But I'd forgotten how big of a jerk, Broyles was to Olivia back in the day, calling her liaison all the time. And,
honey.
Oh,
he called her
yes.
honey.
Yeah, that's right. And it was really annoying, but it was cool to see how much their relationship has grown over the last 4 seasons. So yeah, that was something. And I think it was Michelle that mentioned that it felt like a movie production, and it really the quality of the shots that they did. I don't know if it was a different film or a different processing they ran on it, but the pilot definitely had a higher quality feel than what we see now. And I know the budget has trimmed back some, but also on a pilot you get to spend more money. Typically, I think they spent $10 million on the pilot episode. So it just had a really higher quality feel. Do what?
Fringepedia says that it had a budget of $10 million for one episode.
Yeah,
going back and...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
going back and rewatching these and knowing what we know now, it's a lot easier to pay attention to what works and what doesn't work. And it really felt as though he produced a movie quality premiere for Comic-Con and then took all of that feedback and things sort of disappeared. Like Walter was really crazy and really on edge at times, when he snaps at Olivia, and Broyles was a bit of a jerk. I mean, it was a lot of a jerk. And then that all just sort of went away because crazy Walter, but not angry Walter, seemed to work better. And Broyles being sort of a supportive, more father figure seemed to work better. So a lot of these things just sort of disappeared.
Yeah, but the nice thing was it didn't just suddenly change from one episode to the next. There's still this period where with Broyles and Olivia where he's not real father figure like to her, but they're their relationship kind of thaws. And it's the same thing with Walter. There's still those flashes of anger, but they kind of get toned down as the time goes by. And it's the same thing with Peter. You know, one of the things that struck me was Peter was also a bit of a jerk during the first couple of episodes. You know, I mean, understandably so. He was a place where he didn't want to be, and he really didn't want to be the one babysitting his father. But it was still kind of like, come on, dude. You know, don't you know what's going to happen to you in the next 4 seasons? You know? So, but I like the way that they figured out what worked and what didn't, and then they just kind of trimmed away what did without just suddenly changing it.
Yeah, it was more of a subtle change over several episodes. I think, trying not to get too far ahead, but I made some notes in the Ghost Network and in The Arrival when different characters seem to have a change. And it might be, like Dawn said, where there was some feedback that was coming in. And because it takes time, you know, the pilot was aired at Comic-Con, excuse me, and it was also leaked on the internet that summer. And so people... They could have gotten feedback about that and started applying it to some of the early episodes, perhaps. You know, not that I know the shooting schedule. But typically, I mean, it's going to take... If I hate an episode today, you know, they're 6 weeks or more ahead of me, so they're not going to be able to make changes to anything, you know, for quite some time. So I think it's possible that they got feedback from the pilot and were able to start making some of those changes even as early as episode 3 and 4, maybe. Or maybe it was something that they had planned to do all along as these, you know, these people kind of became more accustomed to each other and learned the way that they worked and became more comfortable with each other.
Well, it wouldn't have the same feel if everybody was just best friends, you know, first episode. You need there to be that tension and, you know, air of mystery and all these backstories that we have yet to learn about. Yeah.
That's very true. I'm trying to look through my notes here and see if I have anything else that's really worth bringing up. I mentioned in my notes here that you remember when they did the raid on Steeg's house? There must have been like 50 FBI agents that were part of that, you know, that storm on his house. And now when we see them, you know, try to make an FBI sting on somebody, there's like 4 agents. I don't know if that was a budget thing or what, but how many times have we said, you know, it wouldn't just be Olivia and Peter showing up to this situation. They would have a whole mess of FBI agents with them, and this was an example where they did.
I think it's funny because actually at the time, I mean, Broyles was part of the Department of Homeland Security, so they're kind of implying these are the guys that are doing the raid, and I have to imagine the FBI's got better funding than DHS does. But.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
The other thing that stood out to me is, I guess I didn't remember this, but they called it Massive Dynamics with an S. Mm-hmm. And I was like, did they change that? Because I don't remember it being Massive Dynamics.
They did change that.
And then yeah, episode 2, it was Massive Dynamic.
It seems to me, and I'm pulling this totally out of thin air, but it seems that there might have been, like, somebody bought the domain name or something, and they didn't want to buy it from them. So it might have been a situation where somebody learned that they were going to have this company named Massive Dynamics, and they saw it as an opportunity to make money. So they bought the domain, and Warner Brothers or whoever didn't want to play that game, so they changed it to Massive Dynamic and overdubbed it. But some of even like the billboard still said Massive Dynamics and stuff. So I think, if I remember right, that's what I heard. That could be totally wrong, but that's for some reason that's what I think happened.
What it says on Fringepedia is that Charlie and Nina referred to it as Massive Dynamics, and closed caption mirrored the errors, and there was a billboard that was improper in the plural term. So whether it was due to the domain name or just slip of the tongue, they apparently made that mistake several times in the pilot episode.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the pattern a little bit. That was something that was really heavily involved with season 1. We saw it over and over again in these first batch of episodes. Do you think that as we're looking at these instances that are happening, where it be the plane crash in episode 1 or the Amber event that we're going to talk about in episode 3, Are they seem to be part of the pattern. We're very much led to believe that they're part of the pattern. So are the events that we've seen throughout the rest of the seasons, particularly in season 4, as we saw some of that stuff start to relate, are those pattern events too, or how does it tie in? Any ideas?
Well, my idea about the pattern was it was just this early evidence of all these things that they, in the future discover, the alternate universe and the people crossing over, and they just stopped calling it the pattern because they knew more about it. It wasn't a mystery anymore.
I like that. You guys have any other thoughts?
Well, it's kind of hard to come up with a really good, coherent theory. My first thought was that the pattern was more tied to what David Robert Jones was trying to do in the first season and getting over to the other side and getting to William Bell. But some of the things that Boyle's mentioned had happening, particularly the kids who disappeared like 10 or 15 years earlier and then showed up without aging a day, seems to, in my opinion, kind of predate maybe what David Robert Jones might have been doing. The question, I guess, is kind of, since the observers seem to be present at all of those different pattern events, if that might be in some way tied toward their plan to take over, that that the 5th season's going to be about, and perhaps looking for those kinds of things that they might be able to exploit in attacking our time.
I like that too. Yeah, it does seem like they need to tie in some way. The observers only show up at significant events in history, and so that for them to be showing up at all of these pattern events, knowing what we know now about the upcoming purge, I like it. I think that's definitely got some plausibility to it.
Yeah.
So I have to tell you guys, I've had the time to rewatch on my own halfway through season 2 over the last week. And I'm thoroughly confused because it feels like, we start off in the first several episodes talking about the pattern, and then we meet David Robert Jones, who it appears is trying to do these things to reach the other side, to reach William Bell. And, spoiler alert for any of those people that are listening, we know that Bell is the one who is trying to create this other world. But when Olivia gets taken over to the other side, it almost feels as though they hadn't decided where they were going with Bell at the very end of season 1. And I know I'm getting way ahead, but having rewatched this, it totally confused me as to, did they really know where they were going with the pattern? And did they know in the future they wanted William Bell to essentially be the bad guy? Or did it somehow get skewed somewhere?
Yeah, I remember our thoughts at the time, because they revealed the William Bell character in the finale, and it was Leonard Nimoy, and then they didn't do much with it. And I remember us having conversations about, did they overcast the character? Did they cast such a great actor that, there might have been some issues with getting him to participate as often as they wanted, or maybe he wasn't as interested in the story as he hoped he would be. But for whatever reason, he wasn't there as much as we hoped that he would be. Whereas they had just gotten some really great, guy off the street that was lesser known but still a great actor, would the storyline have gone differently because he would have been able to participate more often? Because it seems like Leonard Nimoy at one point said that he'd lost interest in the character. And I wonder if we would have had more of what we saw in season 4 with the William Bell character if that hadn't happened. I don't know, but I do think that it ties into what we've seen in season 4 in terms of the David Robert Jones character. The David Robert Jones character had a different position in season 1 because he was trying to impress Bell. In the new timeline, I guess that worked out differently, and he was able to connect with Bell and start helping him out. But I definitely think that all of these things pointing to Massive Dynamic, and I still don't know if Nina Sharp is aware of all this stuff or not. I still can't figure that out. But at least William Bell is aware of it, and it's his company, so he has access to all the research, I'm sure. All right. Anything else on the pilot episode? All right. I can take that as a no. We'll move on to the second episode. Just here to wrap up this one. The glyphs spelled observer, which was pretty cool. The observers were part of their plan from the very beginning. You remember that even in the title sequence, observers are here has always been embedded in that. Here we have the glyphs for the first episode saying observer. So the observers were part of their plan from the very beginning. The episode clue. Now this is something I wanted to do in these summer rewatches because in every episode, there is a clue to the next episode. And it's hard for us to catch those because we haven't seen the next episode when we're watching it live. But here we are going back and watching it through. So we're able to pick out what all of those clues were. So the clue in the pilot that pointed towards episode 2 was a pin and a rose that were on a newspaper dispenser that was shown on the sidewalk outside of Massive Dynamic. So that was our clue for pin rose. And in the second episode, the same old story, one of the bad guys, the main bad guy, I guess his name was Klaus Penrose. And so that's our clue for episode 2. The same old story, written by Jeff Pinkner, Alex Kurtzman, J.J. Abrams, and Roberto Orsi. So we see Jeff Pinkner added to the mix there, directed by Paul Edwards. So let's get it kicked off this time. Gene, I'm going to pick on you and let you go first.
Okay. Well, with this one, I think one of the things that we really need to point out is, as you know, we know with the podcast, things we always talk going back to is what would you do for someone you loved?
Yeah.
And we didn't mention it in the pilot. Obviously, a lot of what went on with the pilot went along with Olivia trying to figure out how to save John Scott and figure out what was going on and
Good
kind
point.
of what she would be willing to do for the man that she loved. And that's really kind of what comes out in the same old story with Klaus Penrose. You know, you say he's the main bad guy, but again, as in a lot of things on Fringe, it's kind of a matter of your perspective. And, and is it truly being a bad person, or is it just what you're willing to do because you care about someone so much, as Klaus seems to for his son? And I always wonder, is it really his son, or was this guy created maybe in a lab? You know, the end of the episode seems to indicate that, you know, he may be like a clone. You know, there may be a whole bunch of them that are in some kind of stasis just waiting to be used.
Yeah.
I will say one of the things that I really did not like was kind of the cheesy dream, I guess, sequence, for lack of a better term, where Olivia thinks she's talking to Broyles, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's like she's afflicted, like the girl at the beginning. And I was like, you know, I don't know, I didn't think we really needed that, but it was, you know, that one kind of encapsulated more of the monster of the week, and not so much delving into the mythology. I think other than, you know, at the beginning, there was a lot of kind of what did Walter work on, and I think also how much is he involved or was involved in any plans for his research, or was he just, you know, taking whatever the Army said, hey, why don't you look into this, and he was like all about it because, you know, it involved massive amounts of psychotropic drugs and, you know, different kinds of physics that he liked. So it was kind of a good monster of the week type of episode in this case.
Yeah. I share your opinion on the pregnancy scene. I look back at it, and I think even at the time I wasn't sure if it was significant, and some people have pointed to that scene as a foreshadowing of what turned out to be Folivia's pregnancy, but that was 2 seasons later when that happened, so I'm not one that points to that and says it was foreshadowing. I just think it was, I don't know, trying to freak the audience out at the time, I guess. I don't know.
But that's an interesting thought. I didn't even think about tying it to Folivia's pregnancy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we noticed that. We thought that maybe it was a foreshadow to Olivia. But what I got out of that scene was that she was feeling all these feelings about being betrayed by Agent Scott.
Yeah. And
she was worried, like, was, you know, like this, you know, she was with him and she thought she loved him, and he told her, he loved her, and he just betrayed her. And maybe that was just kind of playing at her fears of, what if there's this pregnancy looming over her, and that would have been Scott's, and I don't know, just like some fear from that.
Yeah, I'm more on that side right there, where I'm guessing they probably didn't use protection the last time that they were together, and here she is seeing this pregnant girl, and I think it was just playing on all the fears and the emotional roller coaster that she was going through at that time.
Yeah, I think it was just showing like how much emotion she was having and how much fear she was having, and her heart was just broken and betrayed and stomped all over. So she's got a lot to deal with.
Yeah. All right, Don, what about you?
I hated this episode. I've watched it. I've watched it 3 times getting ready for this call, and it is my mole rat boy. It's my Jack with the tattoos episode. I couldn't stand it. It seemed like it was all over the place, and they seemed to take a bunch of different things that never pan out. You got, Broyles meeting with this oversight committee, introducing who his team is. But other than Nina, we never see any of those people ever again. You have that weird thing with Olivia acting pregnant, which just came out of nowhere. And it seemed like a lot of the other scenes, it almost felt like they shot all these different scenes as a deck of cards and then shuffled them up and decided how to put them together. The episode had no flow for me.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, you're entitled to your Stranger in a Strange Land or Night of Desirable Objects episode, I guess. I thought that the boardroom scene is definitely an interesting scene. It's one that we've talked about occasionally throughout the last few years, trying to figure out the significance of it. But honestly, I got to say, with the way that season 4 ended, I see a little bit more. I think I have a little bit more understanding of what was going on in that scene. Thinking about, at the time, this Fringe division wasn't even really a Fringe division. It was Broyles who had some sort of control, some sort of team before that the team, for whatever reason, didn't work. Either they were killed or they were reassigned elsewhere. I don't know how that team came to an end. So he's apparently has some sort of leadership role, but no formal space within these multi-jurisdictions that he's dealing with. But it seems like when he gets Olivia and Peter and Walter, he starts handpicking these people, and it evolves into this really formalized Fringe team by the time we get to where we are at the end of season 4. You remember at one point in season 1, he's going to have to go before Congress and try to secure funding. And then at the end of season 4, we see him get full funding, and he's able to, all that he wants has been given to him. But basically, carte blanche has been given to him, and he pulls Nina in as his Minister of Science. Spoiler alert. But so I just kind of see it as this was really just a really kind of an ad hoc kind of committee that was being formed here. You had some that were probably private sector and some that were definitely civilians when you think about Nina being a part of that. And it was just kind of these people who had influence and power in the realm of science and technology and military that were trying to figure out what was going on with these pattern events.
Yeah, but the problem with it is that just the episode before, which didn't seem to be much time, Broyles was, liaison this and honey that. And then he stands up in front of this committee and says, this is my new team, and I choose Olivia Dunham because she, even though she was sleeping with John Scott, she still went after the clues and brought down the bad guy and was all on her side. And that's what I was talking about, the change in the way he acted, because he seemed very much on her side.
I think publicly you have to be on the side of your team, but when you're with your team, you need to, if there are issues, you direct them to them in a it's like your family, right? Nobody can mess with your family, but you can mess with your family. And that's kind of what I got out of that scene was he had to defend his decisions and his team publicly in front of this committee that he had to answer to.
That's a good point. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in a future episode, when we start getting with the Cortexiphan children, isn't there a scene with with Broyles and Nina, where they're talking about kind of where all the children are or what the list is. I kind of got the impression that Broyles knows that Olivia was a Cortexiphan child, but I may be mixing up some of the stuff.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on that. It very well could be part of the storyline, but I'm not recalling that at all. Are the rest of you guys?
I'm sorry.
No, I think Broyles definitely knows more than he leads on to his team, but I don't think he knew about the Cortexiphan. When she starts having the Cortexiphan things, he seemed almost as surprised as she did.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I wouldn't be surprised if he knows. I mean, he definitely knows part of her background. He may know that. I just don't remember. But I mean, he definitely knew her background, where she, threw up the red flag about the guy who had been sexually advancing himself on that other woman and stuff like that. So he definitely knows more about Olivia than what we've been told. I think that's fair to say. And I think he's testing her too. I think we'll see the progression. I think it's in the next episode where I have the note where we had a shift in the dynamic between their relationship. I think he's really trying to push her to see if she can live up to the expectations and fulfill the role that he needs her to fulfill. And he needs to know that right away, or he needs to move on, probably.
I agree with that.
All right. Any other thoughts on the same old story?
I was a little disappointed in that they didn't delve further into the science of how a baby is born all of a sudden and turns into an old man. I felt that could have been very interesting, and just kind of it was almost ignored, I felt.
Yeah, that would have definitely been interesting. I would have liked to have seen something tie in to what we've seen further down the road. In other words, what was the point of this? If Belle is behind this, if this is a pattern event that Belle is ultimately behind at some higher level, was it to try to create some sort of shapeshifter? I mean, Walter said that it was to try to create a super soldier of sorts, so that could tie into what a shapeshifter is intended to be, or, how did this tie into kind of the larger scheme of things with what William Bell is trying to accomplish?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Anything else, guys?
So, yeah, I got one more thing. I remembered what else it was about this episode that rubbed me the wrong way was when they were getting the images off of her eyes. They're talking about using this imager to see the last thing that she saw. But when she was still in that room, the guy paralyzes her, but then she wakes up and he gives her more paralytic. So the last thing she didn't see was the bridge. And so, there were just these disjointed things so that's part of what, made this episode not work for me. But what I did like is that they knew that Peter was going to be from this other universe from the very beginning. They have Walter hinting about Peter's medical condition. And if, Olivia read the file and she says, oh, all that was in there was his date of birth or something. So, I'm glad that they knew where they were going from the very beginning. Yeah.
I felt the same way you did on the bridge thing. I'm glad you mentioned that. And so, yeah, and you're right about the Peter thing. And they mentioned I think it might be the next episode, the Elizabeth thing. So I guess I'll save that for that episode. I wrote down a couple of quotes from this episode that struck me. One was the Penrose character said, "No one in power should ever learn what he knows," referring to Walter Bishop. And in light of what we've learned through season 4, where we learned that the brain pieces were taken from Walter because he was scared of what he was becoming, but then William Bell rather embraces that and chooses to continue on down that path and become in his own eyes a god. No one in power should ever learn what he knows. Really becomes full circle, I think, in the impact that it has had on the series. And then another quote I have, I think this one is one that Walter says at the end of the episode. He says it's one of the inherent pitfalls of being a scientist. trying to maintain that distinction between God's domain and our own. And that's definitely ties right in with the previous one and something that we've seen repeated over and over again in the series. All right, a couple of Easter egg type of things here. Excuse me. Walter was counting at the end of the episode. He was counting the Fibonacci sequence. Incidentally, the Fibonacci sequence make together, if you put them and you graph them out, they make the golden spiral. And that is what inspired us to come up with Golden Spiral Media as our podcasting company name. The glyphs spelled child, which tie into the man-baby child that was born in this episode. And the clue for the next episode was on a one-way sign. We saw some letters scribbled out that said Voces Video, which is Latin for see voices. And so that ties into what Roy was experiencing in the next episode, which is called The Ghost Network. Written by David H. Goodman and J.R. Orsi, and directed by Alex Graves. You'll remember that Alex directed the pilot. So, Michelle, it's your turn to kick things off here.
Oh, let's see. I'm trying to remember this episode. I watched it last week.
Yeah, this is the one where the guy had like the metal that was put in his blood.
The amber. I was so excited. I was like, "Oh, that's amber!"
Yes, that's right. The amber. Yes.
And I just I thought that was a great tie-in, because you don't hear much about amber, from what I can remember, from till much later. Mm-hmm. And I don't know when it comes back, but I don't remember hearing about amber until they cross to the other universe. So I think that's a great tie-in there. And I thought it was a really just good monster of the week, but yet it really tied in well to, the experiments that Walter did on just kind of helpless people, and how he took advantage, and his, his personality as sort of crazy mad scientist, and how it affects these children, and just kind of has that, factor of how it, we find out it will affect Olivia.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought about the child part of it. It was really cool to see the amber tie-in, and it seemed to me, let me get you guys' opinion on this, that the amber that we saw in this episode, I think it is definitely a form of the amber that we see later on, but it wasn't the perfected type of amber. I mean, just when they took the people out of the bus, the way it was stuck to them, it didn't, and it wasn't quite that amber color, so I'm thinking it was maybe a prototype, or they were trying to develop this technology still.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, because the amber that we see in the alternate universe, and in fact in Letters of Transit, the people inside it aren't dead. And it seemed pretty clear from this episode that everyone inside the amber, in this case, was dead. Yeah. Or maybe just in the process of trying to get them out, they killed them but didn't realize it. But that's, it just seems to come across that it killed all of them. It suffocated them in some way.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And my other thought was it a matter of how they took them out? Because I don't remember us ever seeing in the other universe how they actually dissolved the amber. Maybe there's a way of dissolving it that allows the person's stasis to return, where here they cut them out with, tools from Home Depot.
Yeah, we did see in the Letters of Transit episode where they blasted Walter out of the amber, but I don't know that was really the ideal way to get somebody out of amber. So I don't know. I've kind of fallen. Go ahead.
We get this one little clip, the one where the bank robbers, the twins, they're down and they cut the brother out, but they never really show how they sort of dissolve the amber off of him. They just show the impression where his body had been in the amber. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, remember that episode?
Oh yeah. I was just thinking about that one.
Yeah.
The thing is that the amber seems almost like a secondary piece of the episode, because a lot of the emphasis on the episode, I think, is on who are these people who are doing that, and in particular the glass disc that's in that one girl's hand that her handler digs out. And when we watched it at the time, I think all of your attention, all your emphasis is kind of on that. Who are these shadowy figures behind what's happening, with this, and what are they willing to do next? And it looks like while they were testing the amber, their whole purpose was to try to get that disc from the girl. And while none of that really ever pans out throughout the rest of the series, it's the amber that comes back and that we all remember in the future seasons.
And do you guys think that the two guys in suits that are speaking Latin over the Ghost Network are part of the pattern, or are they competing against it? Because if I remember correctly, John Scott also had one of those discs in his hand. And so why did the DEA agent have one of those discs in her hand? Because we know, afterwards that John Scott was actually trying to infiltrate the pattern. So were these guys like henchmen for the pattern and they were trying to recover data, or are they, I don't know.
That's a good question, because again, that girl's handler mentions that she wanted to get out of her assignment infiltrating the drug cartel, and she mentioned something about the pattern, but he said he didn't know anything about what it meant. So I don't know if they were part of the pattern and the incidents going on, or if they were fighting it. But like I said, they kind of, after a while, just kind of dropped that whole thing. And we never really find out. It's one of those, I guess, mysteries we're left to speculate about.
But the small glass discs, do they come back in somewhere? I'm trying to remember if they come back.
They do, because eventually I think they find a third one, and that's when Olivia goes and Nina shows her John Scott hooked up to everything, and they show what they'd recovered off the disc. And I don't remember which episode it was, but it does eventually come back around.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's all in season 1. I don't think we've seen it since then. But gosh, I was ready to say all these folks were part of the pattern, which at this point I'm associating the pattern with William Bell. And the reason I was willing to associate them all together is because of what Roy always saw in Roy's room. We had the Hamburg flight, which was the pilot episode. We had what was done here on the bus. Then they mentioned something else about these angel suicides and the Birmingham Bridge, which we don't really know anything about. And then we also saw the pictures of Prague, where whoever was killed in the limousine with the amber. So to me, that ties all those events together, which, if you think that the pilot episode was all a pattern event, whoever's behind the pattern and stuff, then I would say that all of these guys are part of the pattern. And I would also say that having John Scott on the inside as your man on the inside is a very valuable tool, But your comment about the DEA agent and her desire to get out, I'm not sure how that lines up, unless that was just something that she said that was just trying to keep her handler, look over here, don't look here, watch my hand over here type of thing. So I don't know. That's really good questions. I'm confused now all over again.
It's a common problem.
It is, isn't it? And then we had the secret meeting at the end of the episode between Broyles and Nina. And so now she's in possession of the disc. And if she's trying to get the information off the discs, and the discs are part of the people who are with the pattern, and those people are William Bell, then I would have to say that she and William Bell aren't on the same team. At least they're not sharing information.
Right.
Are we sure that William Bell was behind the pattern? Because, this was something I always kind of got confused about was, we kind of talk about the new timeline didn't change who ultimately who the people were. You know, Walter was still Walter and Olivia was still Olivia and all of that. But the only one who seems to be completely different is Belle in this case. As we see, even though he's not present very, very often, we do see throughout particularly the second season, or particularly the end of the second season, that he's the one who helps them get back. And it seems like he's on kind of our side, for lack of a better term. But then there's this sudden turnaround in season 4. And that's something that's just kind of bothered me, I think all during the end of season 4, was that if Belle is still the same basic person that he was before, then it seems that he should have been more sinister early on in the show.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Rewatching this first season and the first half of the second season, it really feels like they had all these great plans, but they didn't know if they were going to get renewed. So they carried the story a certain way, because season 2, it almost feels totally different. You know, you've got David Robert Jones is, not the bad guy any longer. And now this guy with the Omega on his head all of a sudden becomes the bad guy, but it's William Bell that's telling Olivia how to find this guy. And it felt like, oh, wow, we got renewed, and so now we need to take the story in a different direction. I don't think William Bell was meant to be the head of the pattern at the end of the first season like he is at the end of the fourth season.
I like that, because you're right. One of the senses I got, and I'm just watching as we go along, so I'm just up through episode 4. But it seems to me like they're pursuing a lot of different directions that the show can go in, and I think as they're going along, they're kind of deciding, we want to follow up with this one. Now this one maybe not so much. I think that the whole John Scott conspiracy was one that they kind of tried to wrap up with a nice, neat bow in the middle and say, okay, good, now we're done with that. We're going to focus on some different things. While there were some things that I agree, like you said, I mean, the idea that Peter was from the other universe, that was something they had right from the beginning, and I think that was one that they were going to stick with no matter what. But I think there's a lot of things that they tried in those first couple of episodes just to try to see, kind of get the feel for where they wanted to go, and then kind of veered off or sliced off those things that didn't work for them, and like you said, in the second season got really, really focused on here's the direction we want the show to go in.
Well, I think part of that was the fact that they tried very hard to be a episode of the week instead of a serialized show early on, so that anybody could come along, and it didn't matter if you didn't see the first 5 episodes, because the 6th episode stood alone on its own. And I don't think it was doing as well. And I think near the end of the season, they realized that, okay, we've thrown those leads out there, and we really need to make this more of a story arc, and include story arc for every episode, and not so much monster of the week.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that.
Yeah, I think that a show like this does bounce back and forth a lot at first, because they want to have a lot of standalones, and staying with the main, underlying mythology of the series requires a lot of commitment. And like, for instance, my husband prefers the, standalone episodes, and I don't know what his problem is, but that's him.
Yeah. Okay.
It reminds me a lot of something like CSI or Law and Order SVU. My wife and I love those shows, and we can sit down and watch an episode, and that episode is enjoyable. But if I missed last week, or I don't get to see next week, or we watch them out of order, it's not really that big a deal. But they don't grab onto my heartstrings and my geek threads the way that something like Fringe or Lost does, where, I don't listen to a podcast about those shows because there's no continuity there is continuity to them, but that's not the main story. where Fringe isn't like that, and I think Fringe had to figure that out for themselves in this first season.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Don. That's why we've never really done a Big Bang Theory podcast. We've had people ask us to do that, and we love Big Bang Theory, but what am I going to talk about each week? I mean, there's nothing that really that I could talk about more than 10 minutes about an episode of Big Bang Theory. Maybe it would be a 10-minute podcast, and that would be great. I don't know. But that's what I love about shows like these, is they really do, hopefully, the ones I like, do carry on from week to week, and it does tie on in together. And maybe not everything ties in together, but most of the stuff does, and it's a puzzle, and you get to start piecing things together and figuring out, the bigger picture of things as you do figure out more of those pieces.
Something that I felt toward the end of season 4, as we started getting more and more answers, was there was a little bit of, a feeling that I had lost something. Because part of what is great about Fringe is that we don't get all the answers, and part of the fun is coming up with our own theories and trying to think about, well, this happened here and that happened there, and maybe they're tied together in some way. And so it's kind of nice that they give us answers. Obviously, if they never gave us answers, that wouldn't be a good thing. But they give us answers, but they still leave enough unknown that, it gives you something to think about. It gives us something to talk about. And that's really, like you said, what sets this show apart from just about anything else that we're watching out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the most important things about a show like this. And I don't think that there should always be answers. It's nice to get them sometimes, but there should always be a few questions.
Exactly. And you answer a question with more questions, right?
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts on the Ghost Network? All right.
Nope.
The glyphs at the end of this episode spelled auger, Aeger, which is Latin for sick, which I guess Roy was sick and he was hearing Latin, so it was kind of nice to see him do that. The clue for this one, when they were running through South Station trying to intercept the delivery there, the transfer, we saw a sign on the wall, like a placard that would be like a restroom sign, that type of thing, just on a wall. And it had a picture of the beacon on there. And of course, The Arrival, which is episode 4, was chock full of beacon and observer goodness. This one was written by Jeff Pinkner and J.J. Abrams and directed by Paul Edwards. And I got to tell you, as I look back at this episode, it was one of my favorite episodes of the first season, and it has remained one of my favorite episodes, I should say. And you heard me mention maybe in the Roundtable podcast that we did with some of the other Fringe podcasts earlier in season 4. One of the things that I wanted to see was I wanted to know more about the observers, and I hoped that we would get a glimpse into the future as to where the observers were from and what their future was like. And we did get that in Letters of Transit, but this is a large reason why. Is because what the mystery that was given to us in this episode right off the bat in season 1 really whet my appetite for the observers, and I've always been fascinated with that character on this show, largely because of this episode. Let me ask you guys this. I was surprised, I guess, to see so much in this episode about how dangerous the beacon seemed to be. Like, they had to keep hiding it, and there was the guy that I don't know what his military rank was that Olivia went to speak with. It was kind of a mutual friend of hers and Broyles. He warned her, stay as far away from this thing as possible. And it just seemed like it was this really dangerous thing. And after we saw it later on in season 4, when it came up out of the ground and Peter was there with the observer and they talked about it and learned that it was a beacon and stuff like that, it didn't seem to be nearly as dangerous as what we were led to believe it was in this episode. So I guess my question for you guys is, did the hype that was delivered in this episode about the beacon, did it live up to that hype, as now we are 4 seasons later and we know more about what it truly is?
I don't think so. But and that guy's name was Henry Jacobson that she went and saw. Yeah. And I don't think he knew what he was talking about. I think he was one of those people that he only knew what he had been told. And for him, it was something that exploded and went down into the ground, made no sense. So he saw it as dangerous. but I never took it as being as dangerous. I mean, Walter had it in his lab and, was sticking EKG leads on it, and it didn't seem like a dangerous bomb that was ready to go off. I think the teaser in all of this was the observer. Why was he eating the way he was? Why was his tech so far ahead of everybody else's? Why did he write in such a weird language? And who was he calling on the phone? And why was he so interested in it? And then, wow, he knows Walter, and he knows what you're thinking by repeating what Peter was. I mean, to me, this was my Walkabout. This was the episode that locked me into Fringe, just like Walkabout locked me into Lost.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing episode with so many questions that said, I'm jumping on this train and I'm going to enjoy the ride.
That's a great way of putting it, yeah. Yeah. I can totally go with you on your explanation there where Jacobson didn't know what he was talking about. New Dana in the chat room says here that it wasn't the beacon that was dangerous, it was Mosley that was dangerous, and I think she's spot on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who was Mosley? I've mentioned a few times throughout the seasons that I would like to see him again. Clearly, I completely forgot that he died at the end of this episode, or at least it looks like he died. He was shot several times by Olivia, and she flipped him over, and there was no indication that he had any life left in him, so I guess he's not coming back.
Well, they said that they were able to identify him, so if he had gotten up and walked away, I don't think they would have identified him, because Broyle said, we found out he was a 2-bit criminal. So I almost feel like they sent him in as a pawn. Just, hey, go get this thing, and if you get killed getting it, we don't care because you're not really a part of the pattern team.
But yeah, and his background wasn't particularly mysterious. He was like a drug dealer, wanted for a double homicide. You're right. I would think if it was somebody that was an important part of the team, they probably wouldn't be involved with, such, I guess, common crime as that. And at the same time, they in some of the discussion about it, they refer to him as the rogue.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he isn't either somebody who was co-opted or somehow taken over, perhaps by the people behind the pattern who are trying to get a hold of this beacon. But still, really no real knowledge why anybody would want it or what the purpose would be.
Is that a duck?
Somebody stepped on a duck.
That's my phone.
Are we having the duck rabbit test here?
Friend duck.
Yeah, I mean, I had thought he was rogue was the glyphs for this episode, and so I had in my mind he was a rogue observer. He had the green, red on his hat. I don't know if he was a rogue observer. I don't know where I came up with that. I know I heard it somewhere, but I don't know where I heard it all those years ago. And so in my mind, he was rogue observer.
I'm seeing something on Wikipedia here that says he is the character introduced as the rogue.
Right. But rogue what? Is he just
I don't know.
a rogue agent, or is he a rogue observer, or is he a rogue X-Men? I don't know.
He is a bald guy, and I think it was on Fringepedia. They said that his eyebrows looked fake, so he may be an observer trying to disguise himself by putting on fake eyebrows
See,
and
I
wearing
didn't think
a
of
hat.
that. Yeah, he had the hat on. You couldn't really see if he had hair, but he definitely had eyebrows. I'd still like to think that he was a rogue observer because he had that blast gun that we've seen the observers use
Right.
presently and in the future, and he had the green, red on his hat. But then I can't figure out why he was a kind of a 2-bit criminal if he was a rogue observer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm still confused on him, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I'd like to learn. I still want to know more about him. I may be the only one out there who's still really interested in this character that died 4 seasons in and we haven't heard from since. But, he's my Agent Jessup, Dana. I want more info on him.
Yeah, and I hadn't given it much thought other than he was just someone hired to go after it. But now that you're mentioning it and the fact that he had the green, red on his hat and was bald and I hadn't really given it thought that he was a rogue observer. I just thought he was someone hired to go get it. And so now you're making me wonder and want to know
Yeah, I
more
want to go
about
take
it.
a look at him again.
Yeah. I don't want to waste anybody's time if it turns out he's nothing. But for me, he's an intriguing character that I want more about. But Don, you talked about the Observer in this episode, and it's certainly whet our appetite for him. And I remember just being so fascinated with that scene where he's totally non-emotional towards the waitress, and she's trying to kind of joke with him, and he's having none of it. And then he honks down on all of that hot sauce and pepper and jalapenos, and it was just fascinating to think about, who is this guy? Where does he come from? How can he not, taste anything like that? Later in the episode, when he visits Walter, and Walter offers him the root beer float, he says, I probably wouldn't taste much of it anyway. So we knew there was something going on with his taste buds. And now we've gotten some answers, some of the answers to that. In other words, we've seen that condition that, as far as their taste buds, is across the line as far as the monthly observers go. In the future, I don't remember seeing anything that told us one way or the other on if they have taste buds in the future with the observers. Do you guys remember anything on that?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't remember them mentioning it, no.
I don't think we got any clues on that, but man, I'm just fascinated by the character.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense though.
Yeah.
I mean, if they lose their hair, they're losing other senses because they're just not needed anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And I wrote in the last episode that was the turning point for Broyles and Olivia's relationship. She confronted him, and then at the very end of the episode, he gave her case files so that she was up to speed on everything. And if my memory serves correctly, there's still going to be another time in a few more episodes where she's going to learn that he still isn't being completely, forthright with her. But we did see kind of a definitely turning point at the end of the last episode with that relationship. But we saw a big turning point at the end of this episode where Peter's ready to walk away and really does walk away. But by the end of the episode, because of the encounter he had with September, he has now turned the corner and he's committed to the team.
Yeah, I just loved that part of the episode. Thought it was great. There was a lot of great character interaction in this one, and his whole revelation and experiencing something, and him realizing that maybe Walter isn't totally psycho and that there's some validity to the things that Walter says.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The other thing that we haven't mentioned about Mosley being a rogue observer is not only the tech of his gun, but the tech of his interrogation. He sticks those things up both Jacobson's and Peter's nose, and he can essentially hear their thoughts that they're not even aware of. Walter never told Peter where the thing was buried, yet Peter knew just from osmosis of being around Walter. So some really cutting-edge tech that we don't have on this side or at this age, at this time in our lives.
Can I present a crazy theory I have on that about Peter knowing where where Walter buried the beacon? And I guess the first thing I have to ask is a question. Was Blue vs. Peter buried in the same cemetery where his grandfather was? Do we know that? Because what I'm thinking is, if you remember when he was getting interrogated, the rogue kept saying, think about the last time you thought your father loved you. And what I'm thinking of is that, maybe Peter is thinking back to that time before he was taken across universes and trying either through that osmosis to get the sense of when Peter died and maybe where he was put, and that Peter never knew where the beacon was buried, but he knew when he thought his father changed, and somehow through that the rogue was able to figure out that the cemetery had something to do with it. That's just what kind of came to my mind, because they never really flesh out that whole osmosis thing.
No, they don't. And I know that the Peter grave it seems to me like it was in some sort of small, isolated cemetery. We'll see it, before the season's over, but I don't know if it was the same cemetery or not.
I got the sense that maybe he was, through his technology, somehow seeing Peter's memories. And maybe just by knowing his dad, maybe he knew places where his dad would hide things or important places to him. And he just picked out, important landmarks in Peter's mind somehow. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's a mystery, I guess. I don't know either.
I also think, looking back on this episode, you get a lot of the hints toward the alternate universe and kind of Peter's place on that. The observer says, when he's referring to the root beer float, he says, 17 years is a long time to be without something you love.
Uh-huh.
But clearly that could also refer to Peter in that case. And on the DVD there was a deleted scene, and it's they're talking about the beacon and where it's hidden, and Walter talks about mentions something from Hamlet and all, but says something about nothing on heavens and earths, and Peter immediately jumps on it and says, "You're talking about multiple universes, aren't you?" And kind of goes into this whole quantum theory thing and saying that that there's an infinite number of multiple universes, and some are very, very close to ours, just minor things that are different. And at the end he says, of course it's completely unprovable. And it's kind of ironic because one, Peter is the proof. He just doesn't know it at the time. But
right.
I was thinking, I am so glad that was a deleted scene, because that's basically the writers hitting it over the head.
Yeah.
This is the direction we're going. And I'm glad that they pulled that out, because even though there are little hints at that kind of stuff, it's not, they let it develop, And that's one of the nice things about Fringe. They don't always hit you over the head with what's going on. They let you kind of come to that realization yourself.
Yeah, that's it. So that was a deleted scene on the DVD you're talking about there?
Yeah. That's a deleted scene that they showed on the DVD.
Huh. Okay. And there was another scene. You're hearing my bonks from I'm trying to search through the transcripts here. But there was another line, I thought it was in episode 3, but I'm not seeing it here. But it must have been episode 2, or I'm searching for the wrong word. But wasn't there a line about having stolen something that didn't belong to you? We saw something to that effect in one of these first episodes, and it just screamed of, Walter stealing Peter from the other universe.
Right, I remember that part.
Yeah, maybe it was...
And that was like, totally, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, let's see if I can find it here in the... Yeah, it's not stolen, so maybe I don't know what the word is, but it was something something to that effect, and that was definitely another foreshadowing of Peter being from the other universe. Okay, any other thoughts on this episode? All right, we did get confirmation in this episode. It's come up a few times on what was Walter's father's name or Peter's grandfather's name, and we saw the grave. It was Robert Bishop. I know that's been discussed a couple of times, so that's the answer to that. As far as the clue for next week, the glyphs spelled rogue. I think I mentioned that. The glyphs for the next episode, when September came out of the bar, or not the bar, the diner, on a telephone pole there was like an ad for, want to get bigger or want to get better, or I don't remember exactly what the terminology was, but that will be pretty much the sign that we'll see in the next episode, which is Power Hungry, where the guy answers an ad to try to become sort of superhuman or to better himself. And so we saw a sign very similar to that on the telephone pole outside of the diner as September is leaving.
He wanted more confidence in himself, I think, is what he thought he was going in for.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, well, next week we are going to be doing this on Saturday night all over again, and let me pull up the schedule here. If you want to find out what the calendar or the schedule is for our summer watch, just go over to thefringepodcast.com fringe.com/calendar. And that will redirect you over to our calendar page. And there's a calendar there. And then the schedule and kind of a simple laid out form is also right below the calendar. And so there you'll see that the week of May 27th through June the 1st, we are watching episodes 105, 106, 107, 108, and 109. And next week, June the 2nd at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, we are going to be doing the same thing over these episodes, and we'll have a different group of community members, and we'll be kind of going around the horn talking about those episodes. So it's going to be fun. And guys, thanks for being the guinea pigs tonight. Thanks for joining me for this kind of water cooler discussion about this show that we love so much. I really appreciate your time and your participation tonight.
Yeah, no problem.
It's a lot of fun. Everybody should do it.
Hopefully we will. Hopefully we'll get more people coming in each week and get a good smattering of folks from all around the U.S. and the world. And you know, here we had the full spectrum tonight in terms of Michelle's a newbie and Don's an old fogey. And so hopefully we'll just continue to get a nice representation every week. No offense, Don.
We're about the same age, so I won't take it too much.
That is true. That is true. One other thing I want to point out: Comic-Con is coming up in July, and so that will be July the week of July the 8th through the 13th. Those aren't the dates of Comic-Con, but that will be the watch week that I'm talking about. So Clint and I will both be at Comic-Con. So if you are going to be at Comic-Con and you're interested in doing this type of round table water cooler discussion about those episodes, which at that point, that would be episodes 216 through 220, then let us know and we'll do a meetup and we'll just turn the recorder on and just chat about those episodes that week. So if you're going to be at Comic-Con or in San Diego and want to do that, send us an email over at feedback@thefringepodcast.com, and the subject line for that one needs to be Comic-Con Rewatch. Otherwise, if you're interested in participating on any other week, send an email over at feedback@thefringepodcast.com with the subject line Summer Rewatch, and we will get you all the information and get you worked into the schedule. I gave you our email address, our phone number. If you want to call and leave us voicemail for this podcast or any of our other podcasts, that number is 304-837-2278. You can connect with us on Twitter at Fringe Observers, and you can connect with us on Facebook at facebook.com/Golden Spiral Media. So Don and Michelle and Jean, thank you again for being a part of this tonight. I really do appreciate it. It's been a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Do you guys have a cheesy sign-off ready? Do you guys have a cheesy sign-off ready?
Oh. Forgot about that one.
I've been thinking about it. I'm going with be geeky.
Okay. Oh, not yet. Not yet. That was your warning. All right. So here we go. Until next time, stay Fringe-tastic.
Thanks.
Insert your own cheesy sign off here.
Be geeky.
All right. The Fringe Podcast and Golden Spiral Media are not associated with Bad Robot Productions, Warner Brothers, or Fox. Golden Spiral Media's use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, and for educational purposes, as provided within United States Code, Title 17, aka Fair Use. Copyright 2012, Golden Spiral Media.